Hi, and thanks for dropping by. A few nights ago, I went out with a buddy of mine to take some long exposure light trails photography. And I've come up with 10 really good tips to not only help you take that kind of photo, but to take stunning light trails photos. If you have any comments or questions as this video unfolds, please feel free to address those down below. Okay, let's get started. All right, so the goal here is to have long exposures, and there are many ways to get to that long exposure. First way is to set a small aperture. In this case, I've used f/22 for 20 seconds. But when you do that, you're going to need something to stabilize so that you're not going to have a shaky, fuzzy, unclear kind of a photo. So the first tip is to use a tripod. All right, you've got to steady the camera. So put your camera on a good, sturdy tripod so that you can take an exposure like this for 20 seconds or longer or shorter. But it gives you that stability that you really, really need. All right. Second image shows a similar image where I'm at an overpass and the highway is there and it's rush hour traffic. So you get plenty of light trails. And you'll see lots of images like this where you have a highway and then you have the light trails because obviously there's lots of cars. But for me, overpasses, it's not so nice. The light trails are nice, but the background is not so nice. And we're going to deal with that in a moment. But for our second and third tips, I'm going to say try using a cable release for your camera so that you're not touching the camera. And if you don't have a cable release, then try using the self-timer on your camera so that you're away. Your hands are not touching the camera while the exposure is on so that you won't have any kind of camera shake, which causes blur, of course. And the third tip for tonight is set the ISO to 100. Or even lower if you can, but 100's fine. That will create a longer exposure, obviously. And again, along with the small aperture of, say, f/16 or, as in this case, f/22, you will have a long exposure. So this one was taken at f/22 for 30 seconds. And I kind of like it because you have this ramp coming down, so that offers you something a little bit different than just straight lines here. And then you have this overpass here with a bus that's going by, and you get the lights over there like this. Now, for the third image, this is where, for me, it starts to get a little bit more interesting. It's not just the old overpass. Go into the neighborhood. Go into your neighborhood a little bit and look for a different kind of a background. So, fourth number tip, we have set your aperture to f/16 or f/22. We already covered that. But try shooting something more than just light trails. Think about the background. That's your tip number 5. Think of the backgrounds. In this case, just buildings. And I'm going to throw in another tip because it can make light trails really interesting. And that is, think about cars turning the corner. Because look at that. Not only the straight line here, but it offers a lot of a really nice dynamic when you have lights that are going around a corner and you get the curve. I think it's kind of nice. So that's another design element to look for, actually, is curving lights, and maybe even in a hilly kind of area, up and down. That's another thing to look for as well. But here, for tip number 5, think about the background. And for me, this looks a little bit more interesting than just being on an overpass with cars going by. Same sort of thing here. Buildings. Lots and lots of lights. You've got curving lights. You've got lights that are coming across here. You've got cars that are turning right in front of me and going around the corner. Shot at an aperture of f/22, this time for 60 seconds. And tip number 6, use crosswalks on city streets as composition and design tools. Look how this leads your eye in to the image. Now, I've got a tutorial on lines and leading lines if you haven't seen that, or you're not too sure how to use lines for your photography. But I think that using the crosswalks as a design element can really add to your photography. Now look at that. Look at these high lights. Look at these lights up here. They're high. Now what could all of that be about? Well, let's take a look at another image. This one is downtown. Same kind of thing. Lights that are going across here. What's all that about? Well, those are buses. And when you're doing light trails photography, be aware of buses and trucks, because they have lights that are higher up than just these lower ones that the cars have. So that can offer you a different look as well. Tip number 7, include high vehicles like buses and trucks. All right? And just for a moment, I actually want to go back to an image to explain something. Where was it here? Okay, see in this image, now I said F22 for 60 seconds. Now you may be wondering, how did I do this for 60 seconds? Because most cameras only go to 30 seconds. Well, there's a way. You put your camera on bulb, and this is where a cable release really comes in handy, actually. You put your camera on bulb, and so that the shutter is wide open, and it stays open. Now, what I have is a piece of cardboard that I've covered in a piece of black cloth, flat black cloth. And I think you can see it here. And what you do is you put it in front of the camera when there are no cars, and then you lift it up when you want to record what's going on. Then you can put it back and forth, and you can come up with really long exposures with really lots of lights. Okay, we've already seen this one. Here's another downtown shot, and again, bus is going across here, truck over here, and you've got your design element, you've got the lines, and so on and so forth, just like you had in this one here. Same thing, leading in. Use them as a design element. It can really work. Or how about this? Shortening up the exposure just a little bit. This one, F16 for 14 seconds, and that's tip number 8. Try faster shutter speeds to include vehicles. So this way, you actually get to see the car. And in this case, this gentleman here had parked his vehicle. I think he was on his cell phone. And then he pulled out, and you can see it. You can see his lights over here, and there the car is again. So you actually see the car twice, here and then over here. And then you see these other ones coming in. And the thing about that is they're stopping for the stop light, the red light, and their brakes are on, and the brake lights are just flashing very brightly. So that's always something to look for too, is brake lights, because they really show up well when you're taking your images. And sometimes it's kind of nice to see the cars. It offers a little bit more action if you can see what's going on there. So that's tip number 8. Maybe maybe quicken up the shutter speed, the shutter time just a little bit, the exposure time a bit. This one, 14 seconds to include some of the action. And finally, tip number 9. You may want to use objects as frames, like windows, doorways, buildings. In this particular case, I've used this back alley, and here are the light trails going through here. Now, you may be noticing I've set my ISO here quickly to ISO 800, kind of high, at f11 for 3.5 seconds. And the reason why I did this was, and I did this really quickly, there were a couple of unsavory types coming in back of us, me and my buddy Keith, and I wanted to get this shot done quickly. They seemed a little bit sketchy, so I wanted to get this shot done, and I did. I got what I wanted. But I set everything just a little bit faster, and I was lucky enough to get a couple of vehicles going by in just 3.5 seconds. And that, of course, brings us to our last tip, tip number 10. If you're not too sure about the part of town you're in, you're feeling a little bit nervous, maybe you're shooting a bit too late at night, things like that, bring a friend, okay? It'll put you a little bit more at ease. But, of course, you have to be smart about shooting downtown. In the city I'm in, it's quite safe, but still better to shoot earlier in the evening than later. Better to shoot downtown when there's lots of people around than in a neighborhood that maybe is a little bit more unfriendly, because you may be carrying around some very expensive equipment. So there you have it, the top 10 tips for your light trails photography. I wish you good luck, and hope it works out for you. You've got to love that long exposure photography. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Until next time, I'm Ray Scott reminding you it's not what you see, it's how you see it. And I'll see you soon.